I would like to welcome everybody to the Green Entrepreneurship Workshop Series, the first in our series of 5 workshops over the month of March. And today we'll be looking at the theme or the topic of greening entrepreneurship. My name's Brock Dickinson. I'll get a chance to introduce myself in just a moment, but I do want to take a moment to share a land acknowledgement. This is a traditional activity that we do in Canada to recognize the lands and the Indigenous peoples whose territories we are occupying or sharing at the current moment. This particular event is being hosted by, among others, the University of Waterloo. And I do want to acknowledge that the University of Waterloo and its campuses are located on the traditional territories of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. And in fact, the University of Waterloo is situated on a region known as the Haldimand Tract, which is land that was promised to the Six Nations of the Grand River. You can see an image of the Haldimand Tract there. It's important for us to acknowledge the sacrifices and the commitments that have been made by Indigenous peoples within the territories on which we reside. And we hope that each of you will reflect on the lands and territories that you are in today as we begin this session. As I said, my name is Brock Dickinson. I have the pleasure of being your Master of Ceremonies or facilitator today. I am the entrepreneur in residence with the Faculty of Environment at the University of Waterloo. And I'll get the chance to kind of move the agenda along today and introduce the various presenters and interveners that we have as part of this session today. We are scheduled to spend about 90 minutes. Although you don't have the opportunity to share your voice, there is a chat function that is currently open. If you'd like to introduce yourself or watch for posts that may be popping up in the chat, that's the ideal place to do it. Later, we will be moving to a question and answer session, and we'd encourage you to bring questions to all of our presenters. In order to do that, there's a separate Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen, separate from the chat. And so when we get to that stage of things, feel free to use the Q&A to pose your question. And as always, you can pose that question in English, French, or Spanish, and we'll make sure that, that some of those questions get to our particular presenters. A reminder that although the languages of the presenters will shift over the course of the session, you can click on the interpretation icon at the bottom of your screen and select your preferred language from among English, French, and Spanish. And that will ensure that all of today's content is available to you in the language that you would prefer. I do want to acknowledge that this is the second of these green workshop sessions that we have done. The last was held about 18 months ago. And it's great to sort of have everybody back together. And I hope that some of you who are joining us today were part of that first session in 2020, but we're really excited by the way that the buzz or the excitement around this session has spread since that first round of sessions in 2020. We have over 1,100 people registered for this series from more than 70 countries. And it's exciting to see how much interest around the world there has been in this particular series. In addition to our sort of primary audience in Canada, the United States, and Mexico, I did look at the registration list. We have more than 15 registrants from India. We have 9 registrants from Ghana in West Africa and 8 registrants each from South Africa, Ecuador, and Colombia. So this is truly a global audience. For some of you, this is early morning. For some of you, this is the middle of the night. But we hope that wherever you are and whatever time it is, that you find this to be a valuable session and that you gain a lot from these activities and from the discussions today and in the coming weeks. I do want to acknowledge that this event is coming together as a partnership between the University of Waterloo in the city of Waterloo, Canada, and the Commission for Environmental Cooperation, an international agency that coordinates environmental partnerships and collaboration between the governments of Canada, the United States, and Mexico. And we will hear from both of those partners in just a moment. At the same time, we aren't doing this alone. We have partners all across North America that are working on this with us through a structure called the Eco-Innovation Network. These are the current members of that network, and you'll hear from some of them today. And over the coming weeks, you'll see representatives from many more of these institutions. We'd love you to join this network, to be a part of this network. And over the course of the next few weeks, we will share additional information about how you can do that. It's now my pleasure to introduce a couple of people who are going to share some initial words of welcome to this opening session. The first of these is Dr. Jean Andre. Jean is the Dean of Environment at the University of Waterloo and a professor in the Department of Geography and Environmental Management. She is the chair of the Canadian chapter of the Sustainable Development Solutions Network, and she is a tireless champion of sustainability research and practice and of the importance of innovation in achieving sustainability goals. Jean joins us today from Waterloo, Ontario.
Okay, thank you very much, Brock. It is wonderful to be here with you all and to kick off this series of workshops, the first of 5 this year. And I just want to say Waterloo as a university is really excited to host this. Entrepreneurship and innovation are in our blood. We've always been excited about the bringing to life and the applying in the real world ideas. And so, you know, and in the Canadian context, the city of Waterloo and the region of Waterloo have been a hotbed of entrepreneurial and innovation kinds of research, often in the technology space, but sometimes also in the social enterprise space as well. You know, and as we confront the challenges of the next decade, from climate change to biodiversity loss to extreme poverty, you know, it's important that we turn all of our entrepreneurial energies to addressing these particular kinds of issues. We have to make a shift, as it were, in why we do entrepreneurship and in how we move the world forward, because that will, of course, result then in a more sustainable and a more just world. And that's really, I think, our ultimate goal as humans. Now, this workshop series is meant to build skills and tools and ideas. And I know that we are engaging a new generation, and I don't mean just a new age generation. I mean, people who are entering into this space of green entrepreneurship with energy from where they are now. And it's a big undertaking, and we want to thank all the people who are helping to bring this to life. So first, we'd like to thank the Commission for Environmental Cooperation, whose technical, logistical, and moral support helped to make this a reality. And we want to make a special thanks to Richard Morgan, who's the Commission's Executive Director, who's joining us for today's workshop despite his busy schedule. And then second, we do want to recognize that our efforts are always stronger when we work together. And toward this end, we've partnered with the Eco Innovation Network, and it's a network of green innovation hubs at post-secondary institutions across North America. And so thanks to our colleagues, our partners in this network. This includes Laval and Concordia and Simon Fraser here in Canada, Sagrado Corazon and the University of Oklahoma in the United States, and Querétaro and Anahuac universities in Mexico. So finally, thank you to all of you who have joined us. I know there's over 1,000 of you this year. Last year, we also, when we ran this, had over 1,000 people taking part from 20 or 30 different countries. It shows us, you know, that there's a lot of appetite for this kind of information. And we hope that some of you who have gathered here will develop and deliver tools that, you know, we'll all benefit from. And we hope that in part, you're here to learn, and in part, you're here to network and to bring your dreams forward. So again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Jean. I appreciate those words and appreciate you being a part of today's activities. It's now my pleasure to introduce Richard Morgan. Richard was appointed Executive Director of the Commission for Environmental Cooperation on July 16th, 2019, after serving a 4-year term as Commissioner of the Canada-US International Joint Commission. He brings over 30 years of combined experience in government, business and management consulting in several sectors, ranging from natural resources to health sciences. Richard is joining us today from Montreal, Quebec. Richard?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Brock, for your warm welcome and kind introduction. I'm pleased to see our collaboration with the University of Waterloo getting stronger, and I am looking forward to seeing our joint efforts again to strengthen the Eco Innovation Network come to fruition. I want to recognize Dean Jean Andre for her distinguished leadership, Dean Jean's vision for the Faculty of Environment to create the kind of sustainable solutions needed to address the complex challenges facing our world aligns perfectly with our own mission at the CEC. And I am very pleased to be with her today in opening this webinar series. As Brock mentioned, my name is Richard Morgan. I am the Executive Director of the North American Commission for Environmental Cooperation, better known as the CEC. We are an intergovernmental organization created in 1994 alongside the North American Free Trade Agreement. It has been our mission for 27 years to work with the governments of Canada, Mexico, and the United States and facilitate public participation to help protect, conserve, and enhance the North American environment. This webinar series speaks to the CEC's recognition of the values of collaboration and cooperation. By joining efforts and by sharing knowledge, we are able to strengthen the capacity of our countries and our communities to address key environmental challenges and adapt in the context of a changing climate. As part of our work, the CEC is committed to supporting young entrepreneurs through initiatives such as the annual Youth Innovation Challenge, which supports young people between the ages of 18 and 30 and provides a platform for young entrepreneurs and innovators to share and grow their entrepreneurial careers. We have just launched our 6th annual challenge, and we are looking forward to seeing this year's innovative solutions to address environmental challenges as we recover from the very long COVID pandemic. Band Gutwith from our team at the CEC will be sharing more details about the Youth Innovation Challenge at the end of today's workshop. As we open this second edition of the Green Entrepreneurship Workshop Series, I encourage today's innovators and entrepreneurs to continue cultivating their unique creativity and ambition by heeding the advice and guidance that will be shared in this webinar series through the expertise of academic experts, experienced entrepreneurs, youth, and Indigenous leaders. Before handing the floor over to our experts and speakers, I did want to express my gratitude to the organizers of this event at the University of Waterloo, who have demonstrated through their many programs and areas of work the critical value of investing in emerging leaders and thinkers. This series is just one of the ways that the dedicated staff, students, experts, and leaders at the University of Waterloo are working toward the betterment of our communities and the improvement of our shared environments. I also wanted to take a moment to express my special appreciation to our team at the CEC for their excellent work on all our youth initiatives, eco-innovation, and partnership. I look forward to the rest of the series and want to thank you for your special interest in learning more from all the experts in this series. At the CEC, we hope that these 5 upcoming workshops can serve as valuable sources of knowledge for those vital problem solvers across North America who will have ideas which I am sure will be worth cultivating and supporting in the near future. Thank you and have a good webinar.
Thank you, Richard. We appreciate the kind words and the presence. The fact that you have joined us for this important discussion and session is very much appreciated. We recognize how busy you are and how great it is to have you here with us today. So thank you very much. I noticed that there are now 130 of us gathered in the session. This is great. We will probably see those numbers continue to climb a little. If you have just joined us, welcome. It's great to have you here. I would point out that at the bottom of your screen, if you scroll down and sort of use your cursor to light up the icons that may be there, there will be one icon marked interpretation. If you select that icon, it'll give you a choice of English, French, or Spanish. And I would suggest that you click on the one that you hope to hear the balance of the session in, so that you can get all of the content in the language that you're most comfortable with. So click that interpretation icon and then English, French, or Spanish. Welcome to the session. We're looking at the question or the theme of greening entrepreneurship today. How do these concepts of sort of a greener world, a more sustainable reality coexist with and align with questions around entrepreneurship and the need to generate new and innovative solutions to the challenges that we face. We have three experts from across North America joining us today, Dr. Jose de Bella, Claudia Sanchez, and Tom Wavering. I will introduce each of them in turn as we go along, but let me start with our first presenter, Dr. Jose de Bella. Jose is a senior research fellow at the University of Waterloo in the Transform project on accelerating sustainability transformations in the private sector. He's the director for the Transform Latin America regional project to map sustainable business models and practices for disaster and climate resilience. His work focuses on business model innovation in the context of global climate change, with a particular emphasis on local adaptation and climate risk strategies throughout Latin America. Jose was the lead of the Parliamentary Program on Climate Change for the Americas and the Caribbean, for the Parliamentary Network of the Organization of American States, and he has worked on regional climate change initiatives with the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, as well as private sector organizations and various international and regional cooperative initiatives. Jose, I'm going to stop my sharing and turn things over to you so you can load up your slides there, but it's a real pleasure to have you with us today. We look forward to sharing your thoughts on this question of greening entrepreneurship.
Thank you, Brock, for the kind introduction and for the invitation to participate. I'm quite happy to join everyone today. I'm gonna be talking a little bit about the project I'm working currently at the University of Waterloo, which is focused on small and medium businesses. And I'm gonna share some early lessons that we have started to generate over the past 3 years. I'm quite happy that the concept of green entrepreneurship was left quite broadly for us to present different aspects to it, which I hope will be beneficial for discussion and also for providing different points of view on what we're doing. Mine in particular is interested in implementation and thinking about how this processes of entrepreneurship kind of unfold themselves in the private sector. So Transform is a network of research and practitioners spread out in 7 universities. I will show a little bit more around that. It's a 7-year project led by Professor Sarah Birch at the University of Waterloo. And the project has been designed initially first to understand and map what sustainability practices are. How do we identify them in real life? What are the innovations that are occurring in the private sector, but also how these activities have been unfolding over time and how implementation, the use of resources, partnerships kind of are supporting businesses' ability to move ahead and go towards, if you want to talk about it like this, a greener way of operating. But in reality, we're talking about really the transformation of the private sector into a new role that it's starting to become an imperative for cities and communities to achieve sustainable lifestyles, but also resilient ones, especially as we have seen in some of the lessons that not only COVID has left us, but the emerging presence of climate impact. So the first part of it has been to identify and understand these practices. The second one is to identify the needs and some of the gaps that we're seeing in entrepreneurs and the need to move forward. So what are the capacity building gaps that we find? How does this capacity differs from traditional entrepreneurship, if you will, for traditional way of doing business? And then how we accelerate the implementation of greener or some more sustainable practices. So this is broadly the project that I have been working on. It's halfway through its life. So initially, the first cohort of partners are spread out in different universities. Each university has a hub and a leader, a professor working on the similar work package of building case studies, looking at SMEs, small, medium enterprises in their region, and trying to understand and catalog some of these practices. Now, in the past year, we expanded our project into Mexico and Colombia. I have worked in the past, as Brock had mentioned, with the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, but also with the RISE network, which is the network of the private sector for resilient societies. And what we have been trying to do is look at sustainability practices and green practices, if you will, through the lens of building community resilience. So this is kind of us trying to connect and expand that very concept of sustainability, not only to talk about the environmental pillar, a social pillar, and the economic pillar, but also how these activities are actually underlying the efforts to build resilience, to actually provide solutions and close some of the gaps in what we would see as vulnerable communities or at-risk communities, or also the erosion of resources and environments where businesses are operating. So a little bit of that effort has gone through the last year. We put up a summer school call, and we had over 60 applicants. I was happy to see that Universidad Anáhuac is part of this innovation group. We had a couple of students from there participate. We ended up with a team of 10 students that carried out research and developed some case studies, which I will present some of the lessons. So the first is why small and medium enterprises. So in the Canadian category, these ones go up to 500 people. In Latin America, we tend to use them up to 250 for small and medium sizes, but we took this broader category to look at businesses and entrepreneurship of organizations that are working up to this scale. And when you think about this, then you're talking about a significant sized organizations that are actually directly responsible for a great portion of greenhouse emissions. Here in Canada, it's calculated around 200 million tons of greenhouses. We don't have, I don't have the numbers for other countries, but they make up 99% of businesses in the private sector in Canada. And this number is quite similar in other countries as well. It's usually ranging between 96, 97% of the private sector are SMEs. They employ 9 out of 10 workers are employed by these organizations, but also they create half of the GDP. And so they have significant resources and make important contributions to cities. And when we connect it more to the urban environment, we also see that SMEs not only are employers and hubs and forces of innovation, but also they construct space. No, they are part of the way that cities operate, that are part of our daily life. So in that way, they represent a huge potential for transforming the communities in the cities that we live in. And especially if we think about their changing or evolving role over the past decades now with sustainability agendas and new frameworks and providing a new way or a new direction in which governments and cities are trying to make efforts. These things will not happen without the participation, engagement, and really a strategic way of the private sector to participate in these processes. So they will be at the core of advancing environmental health and social well-being, but also in maintaining a level of resilience or building resilience in our communities. So that's why we have been looking at them. And I think this is where the role of this idea of green entrepreneurship becomes quite a fundamental pillar for us to think about how and what potential they have moving into the future. So as we had said, like when we talk about sustainability or green entrepreneurship, I think it's a catch-all phrase. In some ways, it has become a way to refer not only to the environmental components, but we start seeing it maybe in practice more commonly used for different activities that organizations or entrepreneurs are trying to achieve. And what we have been finding through the research is that many of them might start with a specific environmental objective or target, but rapidly evolves into looking at the social components. And that's where I think the sustainability frameworks and the SDGs give us this point of reference of what we mean about green entrepreneurship and what are the possibilities for us to think about what role enterprises and investors might start playing in advancing some of these innovation processes, and how to think about the way that business is starting to find some solutions to the challenges that we're facing in our cities. So the idea that it's still a flexible term and a catch-all phrase, for me, has represented an opportunity to start working with businesses in a way that you might expand or broaden the objectives that you initially begin with when somebody's trying to think about greening their operations. So you start with simple, maybe incremental changes around recycling or around office efficiencies, but in reality, when you start building and putting together different pieces, then the possibilities of making contributions through the organization to these green or sustainability processes can be much, much bigger. And I think having that initial broad description of entrepreneurship, I see it as a positive way for us to start working into different ways and really localizing the efforts of businesses to the reality of the communities where they are. So with that in mind, we started to think about, well, what does it look like in practice? So these are just some examples that we're capturing from our case studies. These ones are specifically speaking to our Latin American cases. I have others for Canada, but I wanted just to share rapidly these ones around energy, projects around methane capture and conversion of energy for local projects, urban gardens and community efforts. These are all led by companies that are either are designed to deliver some of these products and services or have begun to adopt and think about a little bit more of their role within the communities they work with. So ecosystem conservation, they started to take more role around how to create value from some of the things that are needed in their particular communities. And I think this is where a shift in thinking around the role of the private sector starts to become an interesting one, because then you see really a concerted or strategic effort to take entrepreneurship or grow a business into new directions that might have not been initially conceived. And I think as they mentioned in the initial conversation, this is an ongoing process of renewal and thinking about how innovation starts to respond not only to the products and services that a company does to gain economic or financial value, but also now to a broader spectrum of needs that we're having to recognize in the places that we live and the places that we do business. So the SDGs give us frameworks and overall guidance and policy priorities, but in reality, what we need in entrepreneurship, and in my experience, has been specificity. We need to be really concrete about what is it that we or an organization wants to do and can do, and then think through it in through that lens that supports not only establishing clear targets, but also measurements, tools, and also thinking about how these organizations can achieve those implementations. So I'm not going to go into much detail. I have 4 rapid case studies that I want to share with you. This is a sustainable fisheries company in Baja California in Mexico. They're doing aquaculture in open sea, but they started repopulation of a endangered species, which is totoaba, for some of the Mexican colleagues that might know a little bit about this. But they started to use an innovation process based on a business conservation unit within the company that also started to enroll the local community to do release of species. They have designed specific infrastructure adapted to maintain sustainable way of farming, but also they started to bring and have an employment program that brought local fishermen that might have not been doing things in a way that would be the most sustainable. So that is the role, and that is the way that we can see and think about entrepreneurship and green efforts in this. The map here on the left, I won't go into detail, but it basically gives us a sequence of activities, a set of actors, and different ways in which a company goes about delivering these services and these products. You might come to hear the word pathways or sustainable pathways in some of your studies or future work. And for me, what this means, and I think if we can unpack it and describe it, it's talking about the resources, the financial and the material that are used, the skill sets, the technology, social elements, the politics that go into implementing some of these practices. So we started to work a little bit to understand and unpack these trajectories and steps. This is a company in Vancouver that are doing diversion of construction waste and doing a circular effort to reuse many of the material that has been left as debris. So all these provide evidence not only of the new ways into how companies are finding niche markets, but also they not only do the work around their core business, which is the use of construction waste, but they also have a very important role in advocacy and working with other businesses and providing education. So entrepreneurship in this way has started to take on also different pieces of the effort of how to run a business. This is a food market in Mexico City that buys local and sustainable. We have a biogas project in Colombia that I wanted to share. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to be very quick in the last slide, which is about the foundations of new business models in entrepreneurship. And we talked about in a new paper that I work with Professor Birch, mainly about non-technical aspects of entrepreneurship. How do we understand how businesses can learn and contribute to their local communities, how they can work with others, and how can they develop the tools to help implement these new solutions. Not all businesses need to provide all solutions. There's so many different opportunities to expand the way they work, experiment with NGOs, with academics, with other, even their own employees and their own communities, how they bring in imagination and a way of working with each other that actually allows to find these new solutions without falling into the traditional ways of incentives and structures that businesses have. And within that, how do we change and provide opportunities for people across the different organizations, scales of the organization, to contribute to finding solutions? And I think that's part of the new set or the new effort of green entrepreneurship. Thank you, everyone, so much for the time. Any questions, please feel free to follow up and share. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. A great presentation to start us off, and we will come back for questions in a few moments' time. I want to recognize that there's now over 140 of us in the room. If you've just arrived, click on the interpretation button in the bottom of the screen and choose your preferred language. But we will continue to move ahead with the agenda. There was a question that popped up in the chat from Adriana around the availability of slides. This session is being recorded and will be available on YouTube in the future. We'll share that link with everybody who is registered for the sessions, but we'll also speak with the presenters afterwards and see whether there's a willingness to kind of send these slides out directly to those who attended today. So one way or the other, Adriana, they will be available for you. So we look forward to sharing the information and making it more widely available to everyone. I do want to introduce our next speaker now, and it's my pleasure to introduce Claudia Sanchez. She is a graduate of the Communication Sciences program with a specialty in organizational communication and communication research from the Universidad Anahuac, Mexico Norte. For 10 years, she was the general coordinator of communication for the Anahuac University Network in Mexico, and a communications consultant for other companies and institutions, both in Mexico and elsewhere around the world. In her current role, Claudia is a representative of her faculty for the North American Commission on Environmental Cooperation, as well as a member of the Eco Innovation Network. She has built alliances in her work with more than 30 non-governmental organizations, and she collaborates on the design and the delivery of projects, of more than 40 projects with those NGOs in the fields of social innovation, sustainable development, and the environment. And Claudia, we had you with us 18 months ago when we did this. It's so great to have you back. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I'll turn things over to you.
Muchas gracias, Brock. Un placer.
Thank you very much, Brock. It's a pleasure to be with all of you. I'm going to start sharing my slides. I would like to start by congratulating Jorge Di Vela. Those last slides are very interesting, all the factors involved in community innovation. And I think that my presentation also talks about that topic. I would like to start with this slide from a colleague from the university, but I think it is very relevant, this vision of what is happening with our world. We're all very much interested in saving our world, whether it's on the financial aspect or social aspect or environmental aspect. We will always have these three dimensions together, and we have to study this with these three dimensions. I'm going to talk about starting training not only in the universities and the schools, but also as resilient communities through social responsibility and sustainability. I have a I'm responsible for a 4-year major, and we have been created an holistic vision of this reality. When you want to save a turtle or a forest, the reality is not separate for environmental engineers to address any issues or just the parts that are going to be working on the economy will be working on economy exclusively. It is a holistic problem when you want to address the problem of an endangered species such as the turtle, or when you have to be in an indigenous community without any electricity, for instance. So that is why it is very important to see this. Even though it's an environmental problem, we also have to include economic and social aspects. Well, as you all know, we have been talking about sustainability in theory, and also about many we have a series of research, but these research or these significance of sustainability is sometimes trapped in the academia and is not getting or reaching those communities where we can have the innovation that we need, so that regionally or country-wise we can create more powerful alliances.
With this vision and what we have recovered with the students when visiting communities that have problems, we see that sustainability is the greatest challenge that we have, and that it will require to retake and to have more knowledge, values, and capabilities in everything, in professionals, researchers, professors, in communities, in families, not only to be trapped in those of us who are studying or that are participating in a Congress, but that together we participate in that the social problem, which is the one that is occurring in these communities. I'm talking about, with this presentation, I'm talking about, as a basis, the Planeta Vivo project. But what we have with this report says that we are drastically losing the species and the biodiversity. And this is a severe problem, as all of us know, because biodiversity is basic for human beings and the earth, and we are destroying it without precedent. And this index of Planeta Vivo gives a follow-up that thousands of populations, mammals are, and other type of birds and fishes and reptiles are being we're losing them, and we have to make this planet healthy and sustainable. Less than 68% to 2016. You should see the numbers that we currently have regarding mammals, um, reptiles, birds, and fish. It says that in fresh water, we have 84% of populations that we have, and one of out of 3 species in sweet water and fresh water are in danger of being extinct, a decrease of 84%, equivalent to 4% per year. This chart is very representative because we see how in 2010, there was a combination of topics that were priority, and they were causing this loss of nature, but also of another type of the depletion in humanity, and we had other problems that we had to respond to. And now we see that in 2020, the 5 main threats to the environment are environmental. And this is why we are emphasizing once again, not because it's a fad, not because if we like nature or not. This is going to create a series of problems in the future, which will affect in the economic and social and migrations and in many other catastrophes that we could have as humans. In Latin America, for example, this is the one that is more affected by this loss of biodiversity because it's an area that is very rich, where we have many species of animals, amphibians, and insects and plants. And there's a pollinizer collapse, 78% in the abundance of insects, for example, in Germany between 2008 and 2017 in the areas of grasslands, and 49% in the abundance of butterflies in the grasslands. And we see this when we travel in the highways. I remember that when I was a child, we had to clean when we were traveling by car. My father had to get out and clean the windshield because there was full of insects. But now you get dirty because of dust, but we don't have any insects. And we have ignored also the soil. The loss of biodiversity of the soil is also very severe because there we have many other pollinizers and ecosystems. The decrease in the species of plants, for example, in Mexico, those of us, I see that many of you who are with us are from here, from different parts of Mexico, and we use plants, medicinal plants. We use plants in order to be able to for decor and for rites, and also to cook, to eat them. So this loss of biodiversity in our plants, in our vegetables, are very important for the cultures. And finally, humanity is giving away all this annual natural budget. And this has to do a lot also with security and with the food waste, because we are not aware of the methods of measurement of the loss of these foods that we waste every year. And this is a great topic in which we should get prepared as global citizens. We are losing also savage areas of land at a very expedited way. In our seas, only 13% of the area is considered wild. And also, we have the cherry on the pie is climate change. More than human is facing this type of losses because of human activities, because we don't give this importance. We don't consider it important. We don't measure the resources that we use. And this is going to have the climate change effects. So what are the implications that all of this has for us? Just to do research and be concerned and how to recover the forests and how to improve this way of life, which is natural. We have to think in the future in our human development for our food. if biodiversity is extinct, it's going to be more expensive to have food. The cost is going to be very high and it's going to have an economic impact. And of course, this has a direct impact on the food security of humanity. And we all know that a healthy planet for a healthy population is very important. And this is why the question is, what new type of citizens is required by this planet? This global citizen is getting prepared in this region, in this locality, to understand what are the natural resources, what are the strategic alliances with which they have to develop or implement innovation. And I think that this is in a second stage. The communities meet and they try to get ahead, but I really don't see an initiative of a model that would allow us, that immediately would allow us to integrate these communities in order to know, since they are very young, since they are children, what are the resources and what is the possibility of innovation in those territories, and how strategic alliance may be knowing their biological environment that they have. We have to create territorial vocation, the biological corridor, the diversity of the species, which are very valuable for their environment, the natural capital, and the vulnerabilities and the externalities. And this is not only for those of us who are studying sustainability, and my students study ecology, climate change, biological corridors, the evaluation of environmental impact and toxicology, and international balance, and the development of companies, social companies. And this cannot be trapped in a university. We have to start putting them down, or taking them down to the communities, which are the ones that can solve this type of problems more. Values also, to be concerned about values like social responsibility and community participation, solidarity, and subsidizing. And these capabilities of participating, of a dialogue and collaboration, to have a common idea with others, even though politically we have different parties with different ideologies, we have to center in saving this world, this planet, this locality where all of us live. Sometimes these communities, in the indigenous communities and the local population, are the ones who know better that we are not recovering this knowledge that we can share. We only have them for somebody who knows something about sociology or want to develop a beautiful book about a locality or location, but we are not implementing a practical education package for these communities. So what I would like to share with you is, what are the conditions in which we will be living in this planet if we don't go into these topics and develop potential topics for all the communities and get closer to them. With this, I conclude my presentation, and I hope that this is an important thing that you can think about. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Claudia. As always, an excellent presentation with so much to think about and so many great ideas for us to reflect on. I'm sure it raised additional questions in those who are listening and participating, but as before, we'll leave those aside for just the moment while I introduce our next speaker. If you do have questions, you can start to pose them in the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. We'll get to those after our third presentation. But it's now my pleasure to introduce Tom Wavering, who will be our final panel presenter. Tom is an accomplished researcher, educator, executive, and ecosystem builder who leads technology from conception to commercialization. He is the founder and executive director of the iHub at the University of Oklahoma, and he launched and leads award-winning programs to grow Oklahoma's innovation economy. The iHub's groundbreaking programs have already generated an economic impact of more than $320 million over the last 4 years. Tom is also on the entrepreneurship faculty at the University of Oklahoma's Price College of Business, And prior to joining the University of Oklahoma, he was Vice President of Strategic Technologies at Intelligent Automation, Inc. Tom, it's great to have you with us, and I look forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much, Brock, and it's an honor to be here today and share a little bit about some of the activities we have. So you'll notice my presentation is going to be a little bit different than the first two. I think they did a really good job of talking about the problem, talking about the different ways people can get engaged, at a community level, at a private business level. What my talk is going to focus more on is, for everyone who's here on this call, you want to do something, you have ideas. How can your university, your ecosystem, your government do things to help promote taking those ideas, turning them into actions, which then turn them into the outcomes that we're all trying to work towards, and do that all in a very holistically and sustainable way. And so, assuming I can click here, there we go. So, and again, others described it very well, but there's lots of different ways you can define this green entrepreneur. Whether it's taking existing business and doing it in a more, or communities and doing it in a more sustainable way, whether it's these new ideas, totally new concepts that, again, are going to be more sustainable, more friendly for the climate and for nature. And then there's other things that say, hey, here's a way we're doing something now. Maybe there's a better way to do it that lessens the impact on our environment. So lots of different ways you can approach this green entrepreneurship, but still at the end of the day, you have that idea. Then what? What do you do? How can the community, how can organizations, how can governments support what you're doing to turn that idea into something? And so I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing here in Oklahoma, of all places, Oklahoma, that maybe might be helpful and inspire or give some ideas of how you can get involved in your own ecosystem and maybe adopt some of these concepts. And then at the end, I'm actually going to announce a really exciting program that we have that is open to many of you to help, again, turn that idea you have into an actual, green tech startup. So as Brock said, I'm at the Tom Love Innovation Hub here in Norman, Oklahoma, just south of Oklahoma City. And we work to, not just in green entrepreneurship, but all types of entrepreneurship, trying to help folks take those ideas and first be inspired about, even being an entrepreneur, being a green entrepreneur, having this, as your career, as opposed to, just going and graduating and going work for some big company or some organization. But then let's not just keep it at ideas. Let's turn it into something. And one of the things that was interesting when we first got involved with the CEC and the Eco Innovation Network is we noticed there were lots of really interesting parallels. So we developed a lot of programs here in Oklahoma because we're not on the in California, we're not in the East Coast, we're kind of in the middle of the United States. And a lot of the stuff that is on the coasts isn't in the middle of the states. And so what we found was, if you're trying to support entrepreneurship in a place like Oklahoma, you need to do a little bit more. You need to have a little bit more connection, a little bit more support, and take a little bit more holistic approach. Well, what was interesting to see was that in many ways, it's the same when you're talking about green entrepreneurship. When you're trying to start a business that is focused on the environment, the rules that define the success of that business are different than a traditional go get money, get rich business. And so as a result, it sometimes is a little bit harder for investors or other folks, the traditional investment environment, to say, hey, I'm going to put this money in this thing, and it's okay that it's going to take an extra 10 years for me to make some money. That can take a little effort to change folks. Now, a lot's been happening where you do see more sustainable investments, and environmentally focused venture funds, but a lot of the money still wants to make money. And so one of the ways we approach that is, what can we do on the university side, on the ecosystem side, to support those ideas and companies and future startups more? And so one of the ways we do that is we have, here at the university, we have a bunch of resources. So like we have wood shops and metal shops and 3D printers and computers, and so all types of software and hardware, and we make it available to anyone to use for no cost. So you can be OU, you can be any of you. Any of you want to come to Norman, Oklahoma, open the doors, come use our stuff. It's great. So it's free, it's open to anyone. We don't take intellectual property on things that happen here. And if you have no idea how to use any of these cool tools and things that we have, we have staff and we'll teach you and we'll help you. And if you are an expert, we'll get out of your way. And so it's really trying to eliminate all the, any excuse somebody has where they say, hey, I have this idea, but I don't know how to do this. Great, here's people who do. Oh, I don't have access to this. Great, now you do. And doing that in an activated way so that now this thing that otherwise would have been an idea could turn into a reality. And so you're going to hear in a couple of weeks, a quick preview, keep attending these green entrepreneurship talks, because for the last week, one of the student startups we've been working with, Bison Underground, is going to share their story. And they were very much in this case. You have some geology students who had an idea, but to do it would require like metalworking and welding and a tractor and all this stuff they didn't have. Well, they eventually found us, and guess what? We have welding, we have metal, and we know people with tractors. And they turned that into something that's won an X Prize for carbon sequestration. And they're viable startup and off and going. But sometimes it's that access to resources at that very early stage that can be so critical. So again, in the areas that you're in, are there universities, are there labs, are there high schools, are there places that have things you could use for your business? How do you encourage them to open their doors and let you use that? Here in Oklahoma, we did. Another thing we do is called our OU Startup Programs, and this is just, again, how do I take a student or someone who has this idea all the way from that idea to something that those folks who are motivated by money will write a check for, right? And so how do you turn the idea, understand what the business model needs to look like, understand that the technology works, understand how it can scale in this sustainable and holistic way, and at the end of the day, be something that'll have the impact that you want to have. And so our startup programs are a mix of kind of community building, idea evaluation, and then just, again, a lot of support, helping those folks. Maybe it's a nonprofit, maybe it's a social entrepreneurship driven activity, maybe it's just a regular, entrepreneurial activity like the Bison Underground, where they are trying to develop a product that's going to do carbon sequestration, but it also really helps farmers. And so there's a good economic viability model for the technology, other than just, it's going to help the earth. It can meet both requirements of sometimes being a successful startup. And so then the other area we do a lot of work in is we have a program called OK Catalyst, which is really focused on this really exciting program the US government offers called the Small Business Innovation Research Program. This is $4 billion the US federal government gives away every year to high technology businesses. The requirements are you're more than 51% owned by US individuals and you're less than 500 people. Those are the requirements. And what's nice about it is basically the US government is leveraging the resources they have to say, how do we take that bet? How do we take that super high risk investment at that very early stage and do it in such a way that, helps those ideas, again, turn into, what would be a very successful, startup business. And then if it all works, the businesses grow, they go pay a lot of taxes, which go back to the government, and they do it again. And historically, it's had a lot of success and has one of the best returns on investment of anything the US government does. And so, wrong way. So again, why this money is great, doesn't impact equity. It truly is cash. It's not a loan. You can win as much of it as you can win. And it addresses, again, some of those technical risks or even management risks, business risks you have in that early stage of, hey, I have this idea, I think I can do it, but I'm not exactly sure how. I'm not exactly sure what all the steps are going to be. I'm not exactly sure how I need to solve this technology. Great, here's money, go work on it. And so for this incredible resource, it's like, wow, why aren't there all these, all over the US, all these amazing tech startups that were funded by SBIR? Well, one of the challenges is there's very few places around the country who actually even know this program exists, let alone how to win funding from it. And so that's why one of the things that we've done is create, again, a suite of programs that can help folks here in Oklahoma and even in other parts of the country access this federal funding. When you think about SBIR, this funding, so I said it's $4 billion. It's like, great, I want $4 billion. Okay, well, you don't get $4 billion. But basically what they do is they break it into kind of a phase one and a phase two, where the phase one is proof of concept. You have an idea, you want to prove out the idea. Well, the federal government will give you $100,000 or $200,000 for like 6 months, prove out the idea. That's a phase one. Phase two is, hey, you proved out the idea, now you need some money to actually, scale it up, make it bigger, test it more. That's about $1.5 million. And what's nice when you think about, green tech and the types of technology solutions that need to be developed to help support all those different programs you heard about earlier. When you look across the US federal government, there are many groups that are actively involved in the research and development and commercialization, startup activity, whether it's NASA from the space perspective or Department of Energy from the energy perspective, or groups like the National Science Foundation who are just looking for that really cool groundbreaking technology. Even the Department of Defense, who is often one of, a big polluter. As a result, they care about figuring out environmental solutions for their big pollution issues. So they also fund a lot. And then obviously, of course, the Environmental Protection Agency. And so each of these agencies all have their own versions of this SBIR program. They take that $4 billion and divide it up among these types of groups. And so as you're an entrepreneur and want to, have this idea that you want to turn into a startup, if you are in the US or have friends in the US that you can join a startup with them, SBIR can be a really great opportunity. So now you're like, okay, great. Tom, you just told me all about how great SBIR is. I want $4 billion. I want to help the environment. I have a great idea. What next? So we're really excited as part of the workshop today to announce a new national program that we're launching around helping up to a handful of startups around the United States pursue these federal programs. So we're waiting to see exactly how many we're able to select, but imagine 5 to 10 startups from across the U.S. That will be able to help. And what we do as part of those programs is we can walk you through everything from, hey, I just have an idea. You need to incorporate your company. You need to file a bunch of paperwork with the government. You need to write proposals. You need to build teams. You need to figure out strategies. Great. We're there. We'll kind of help you through that whole process and provide some teaching along the way. So if this is of interest to you, or you have friends who this is of interest of, applications are now open. They'll be open through all of March. The website is there, the okcatalyst.com/funding labs. And again, when you apply, it's a virtual program. It'll be open, you'll be in it for about 12 months. And then what we'll do is help connect you to these different funding opportunities so that hopefully by the end of the program, you'll have won at least one of those phase one awards, which would be $200,000 or more to launch your business. And again, it's cash. It doesn't take equity. We don't charge for any of our stuff because again, As I mentioned, all our different programs, whether it's space, whether it's startup support, whether it's this SBR stuff, we understand that you need at that earliest stage for ideas, and especially these green tech ideas, the more support you can give to those ideas to nurture them and truly understand what the return on investment is, what the impact's going to be, the better it's going to be for those ideas and those businesses to ultimately be successful. So with that, there's all our contact information, and I know Brock and the CEC will share the slides and more information. So I will turn it back over to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Tom. And exciting information and an exciting announcement as you roll out that new program. And I can see from some of the chat and questions and things already that there's clearly some interest being displayed in what you're talking about. I'd invite all three speakers to turn their cameras back on now as we sort of move to a more formal Q&A session. We have been indicating that the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen is now open and available if you do want to pose questions to any of the three panelists. We've got a number that have arrived already, so maybe I'll start with some of those. And one of the themes that's emerging amongst the questions is the notion of the circular economy and how that's exciting some people. So maybe I'll start with Claudia. One of the questions around the circular economy, this came from Miguel and similar questions from a few others, was about the challenge of thinking about these ideas in the context of communities that are facing hunger and poverty. And so how do you begin to introduce these questions about the circular economy to communities that are facing very immediate struggles that might lead them to think in other directions?
Bueno, pues es muy interesante esta pregunta.
Well, this question is actually very interesting. A while ago, when I was talking to the Naucalpan municipality and what they were going to do with the waste management program, and we discussed that they could start with a pilot program, and we can discuss very specific things, people who recover materials to be recycled come from many areas. The users, the consumers, and others are the ones that collect the garbage. So it is very important for the model to actually map the different stakeholders and see how they're going to be included, because what usually happens is that large companies start looking at the money behind recycling materials or some other processes, but they do not integrate local communities or actors that are already part of that process. So my recommendation is to start by identifying all the actors in that community, create a very small model and implement it with certain materials only to see how that circular economy runs, how this material will be reused, who the participants are, and have a clean process for not only for the destiny of the waste, but also everything is basic to be able to see a sustainable model, and that's my recommendation. I will stop here.
Thank you, Claudia. Jose, I may come to you next. With building on some similar ideas, Miguel, who asked that previous question, was also intrigued by your example from Vancouver of the company recycling construction waste and wondered what they do with the waste. And I think similarly, Elsa was intrigued by your municipal solid waste and biogas example and wondered a little bit about how that works. So these are very practical examples of some of those circular activities in place. Can you share a little bit more detail about those and how they might be relevant to people who are considering similar opportunities in other places?
Yes, thank you. I'm going to touch briefly on the last question around communities. And I do think that it is very important that the responsibility of undertaking some of this environmental practices is not transferred or placed burdensome of some of those communities that might be less responsible for them. And we know this is a part of the climate justice framing and discussion, but But with that in mind, and thinking about the cases that we have been identifying in our work, is that many of the companies actually build partnerships with those kind of loosely informed community groups that might be depending on some of these activities for their livelihoods. And that's where the role of the company, not only as a corporate social responsibility, which is really just a mechanism, but in reality as a core function of how they plan their investment, is working with the local community, having local employment programs, and really giving the opportunity to share in some of these benefits, but also profit-making and processes. And I think that's an important piece of the conversation around entrepreneurship, and especially taking on sustainability that it's not touched upon, is that there's going to be trade-offs at one point, and there's things that have to be reevaluated through the traditional lens of business. It won't happen, the return, as fast maybe as in traditional business. It will require certain efforts, but the vision is to expand it into a long term. So with that in mind, for example, the case of Vancouver, which is the circular economy, what they did is, it's a small company. It's really a 3 people plus 2 or 3 support staff. And what they did is they established this construction recovery model, where they started to talk with some clients or construction businesses and say, can we put almost like a separation bins in your site of work, so that you have wood, you have nails, you have metals, things that can be reused. They recover it, they clean and they distribute. Some goes to the landfill, some goes to recycling center, and now they were moving into doing it as a direct sale point for industries such as I don't know, designers or others. Well, in Vancouver, they have the movie sets. So they were starting to think about how that wood could be reused. So it's really about finding the connections between maybe 2 areas between waste and also other inputs. And I think that's where some of these smaller businesses are finding the opportunity. I've been working also with another project in Baja California around composting for the agricultural sector, and thinking about partnerships with fisheries for fish waste, because that goes directly into composting. So you start building these partnerships and supporting kind of the emergence of a circular model. And I think that's where some of these efforts can be. And it's really about understanding where you are placed. In terms of the biogas project in Colombia, that was initially out of an open call from local government to start off a project, but the trajectory of the company was interesting because they built the partnerships first with UN agencies that provided technical support. It started just as a methane capture project, and in the span of 2 or 3 years, with some support and emission of carbon bonds, they were able to get some technical support from similar companies operating abroad and convert it into an energy generation project. But in that case, they started 2 side investment avenues. One, to sell at very low cost energy generated from the methane to the local community, especially the ones living around the landfill, and a social investment vehicle that was providing specific support to the community. So they were also part of that project. So I think that's where maybe traditional ways of finding partnerships and selling your project, not only to the financial components, but it's also to the communities and the social aspects of what it builds, will result in my view, and what we're seeing, in some surprising avenues to move ahead. Sorry, I maybe overshot there, but thank you.
That's okay. Thank you, Jose. It's all great information. I just want to make sure that we have a chance to get to a few more of the questions. Tom, I think I might start with you on this next one and then go back to the other 2. But obviously, the access to funding is striking a chord, and lots of people are interested in this. There was a question from Dama about whether non-technology oriented startups in the environmental space might be eligible to tap into this, or potentially other sources of funding as well. And then I'll broaden this out once you've reflected on that a bit to Claudia and Jose, and I may jump in at the tail end too, to sort of say, Are there similar kinds of funding programs or resources that are available to help entrepreneurs in Mexico or in Canada that you're aware of, so that even though we can't access US government dollars, we might be able to do some interesting things as well? So Tom, I'll start with you and then go to the others.
Thanks, Brock. And yeah, I wish there were more things that could be done at this international level, but I don't make those rules. I just help people access the money that we can. But to answer the question about non-technology, often people, when they think about this federal SBIR program, one of the issues is that there's just a lot of misunderstanding, like, oh, you have to have a PhD, or oh, it has to be nano blockchain, artificial intelligent, blah, whatever thing. When in actuality, what they're, and every agency is a little bit different, but, there could be a group like the US Department of Agriculture that has an SBIR program, and it's just looking for better agriculture methods. So it could be a method, it could be a process, it could be a website, a mobile app. It could be nano blockchain, crypto, something. But it's really about, do you have an innovative idea that is solving a problem that has enough risk that a bank or a venture capitalist won't just write you a check? So it's like, maybe. That's the type of thing that SBIR can fund and help support, and that's what we help try to connect people to.
So maybe Claudia, are you aware of programs that support social and green entrepreneurs in Mexico?
I have seen that some companies are currently working on strategic partnerships, sometimes with some civil society organizations, to call for a certain innovation. If you have a new idea as a young person, and when they are awarded, these people that are awarded receive certain grants. Here at the university, we have this type of calls, but some government agencies give some grants, but I don't see a very specific initiative like the one Tom has mentioned. And I think that is great, because the Mexican model is built differently, and it is done at a very local level.
Excellent. And Jose, you've worked in a number of different jurisdictions and countries. Have you come across programs that entrepreneurs seem to be tapping into in any of your work?
In the Latin American context, I agree. Like it's quite more of a local. It goes through the research avenues, the science councils, and not as specifically that I can think of. But for example, obviously the US and Canada have been building these ecosystems around innovation hubs, and they're a little bit more forward moving in the financial space. My expectation is that hopefully we will start seeing more of the private financing avenues come through the Latin American countries, and some of the opportunities will arise. I think the program that Tom described is fantastic, because you do need that time to test and develop the ideas, even companies themselves. I think pushing that from the policy side to create those opportunities for people just to really operate without any specific boundaries, but really shape in and try what they need to do is I think, a priority for us.
Excellent. And I might just add very quickly for Canadian participants, a couple of structures that could be helpful. If you're in Ontario, there's a structure called the Small Business Enterprise Center. There are about 60 of those located across the province, and they play a similar role to part of what Tom was describing. And across Canada as a whole, there's something known as the Community Futures Organizations, or Community Futures Development Corporations. Most communities, many Indigenous communities as well, will have community future structures in place, and they do have funding programs to support these kinds of initiatives. This is, I think, one of those unexplored areas where it would be great if we could find ways to share more information about what's out there to support green entrepreneurs, because we all know a little bit, but none of us has the full picture. I want to pose maybe one final question here. I'll toss this out to Tom. This came from Jason. who I think was really curious, Tom, about what inspired you to move into this space. You've worked in the private sector, you've worked in academia. Why this desire to make change in the green entrepreneurship space?
Well, I would say at least in my journey, it was when I worked for companies. I always saw kind of the potential that universities had in terms of great ideas and great innovation and great things, but I never saw many universities ever do enough to actually help anybody do anything with it. So that's what my company did. Our company was the company that would show up at every university and help them, go commercialize those ideas. And that was great for us. But kind of to your point, it was great for us. So after a while, it's like, well, how do we make this great for more than just us? And so I was always intrigued by the idea of going from the corporate world more to a university where you could have more of that ecosystem focus. And instead of, my company in Washington, D.C. goes and wins, 100 of these programs, that's all, $100,000. There's actually 100 little startups that all do that. Because when you can do that, you can really start to change a region. You can really start to change an area. And so that interest then has bled into all the different things we're doing here now to kind of solve this same problem where there are some big problems and big things that need to change. And too often people approach it from I just do this or I just do this. And so what we've tried to do is, hey, how do we connect to our friends in other countries? How do we connect to other resources in Oklahoma? How do we connect all these different things so that we can take this more holistic solution? Because then it's not just great for me or not just great for my company, but it's great for all of us.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And thank you to all of our panelists. I will take a moment to thank you more formally as we wrap up the program in about 5 minutes time. But I do now want to turn things over to one final presentation. I'd like to invite Ben Gatquath from the Commission for Environmental Cooperation to join us. Ben is the CEC's coordinator for diverse and inclusive outreach and engagement. And as part of her work, she works with youth all across North America on initiatives of the kind we've been talking about today. And one of the very exciting things that she's involved with is known as the Youth Innovation Challenge. And Ben's going to share a little bit of additional information about that with us before we wrap up today's session. This is a competition with some prize money attached. So these questions of financing and where to get resources are directly connecting us to what you're going to talk about, Ben. So I will turn things over to you.
Thanks very much, Brock, and thanks to all the speakers today as well for such an interesting discussion. Just as Brock has mentioned, I'm really looking forward to share with you the 6th Annual Youth Innovation Challenge. This is an opportunity that is posed by the CEC for young entrepreneurs all across North America to share with us their innovations in order to compete for funding up to $15,000 Canadian. So it's a great opportunity for those of you who are working on solutions for environmental challenges in your communities. I'm just going to share my screen quickly, just so you can see our theme. So for this year, our theme is innovation towards COVID-19 recovery, inclusive solutions for resilient and sustainable communities. And so through the challenge, we're looking to fund solutions which address or otherwise respond to issues related to COVID-19 and sustainability. And this can reflect a wide array of areas, from the management of discarded protective material, the promotion of environmental education within communities, the revival of the social and solidarity economy, and so much more. And so if you or anyone you know are interested in competing in this challenge, or if you think that someone could benefit from this as well, we encourage you to visit our website, cec.org, or the submission platform itself, cec.submittable.com, to learn more. And if you'd simply like to stay in touch with how the challenge evolves, feel free to follow the CEC's social media accounts or our newsletter to stay in touch and up to date on any relevant developments. So the challenge closes on March 31st. And again, you'll be given, if you submit, you'll be given the opportunity to share your solution at our annual council session with the top environment ministers of Canada, Mexico, and the United States. And you'll also be able to receive up to $15,000 Canadian. So we really encourage you to take advantage of this opportunity. And of course, if any questions, do feel free to reach out to us here at the CEC. And I'll pass this on back to Brock.
Thank you very much, Ben. And the Youth Innovation Challenge is a great program, great competition. So I would encourage any of you who are thinking about innovative ideas from within your communities or emerging from your studies to take a closer look at this program. It's an exciting opportunity in a lot of ways. This brings us towards the end of our session today. And I first off want to thank all of you who have joined us. We're sitting at 150 people at the moment. We peaked slightly higher than that. It's been amazing to see such great participation from all around the world. And I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to chat about things like funding opportunities in Sri Lanka or funding opportunities in Ghana, but it's great to see so much passion around these issues from people all around the world. I want to extend a particular thanks to Richard Morgan and to Jean Andre for welcoming us to this session and for helping us to kind of mobilize the resources to put this incredible amount of information and this incredible gathering together. We really appreciate the support that you have shown and that you have continued to offer on an ongoing basis, as we now have been doing this for almost 2 years. It's very exciting to see this continue to come together in such amazing ways. I want to thank our three presenters, Jose, Claudia, Tom. Great information, obviously lots of questions. I suspect people will be reaching out to you on LinkedIn or other ways to sort of get more information about what you've talked about today. So I hope that you'll welcome and continue to share the information with us as you have today. This has been very generous of you, and we really appreciate the time that you've taken. I want to thank the team in the background at Entrepreneurship and Environment at the University of Waterloo that's been helping me with this, and especially the team in the background at the CEC. There's a lot of people who put a lot of time into this, including those who have been working to organize these sessions, those who are working on the tech side to hold all the pieces together. This looks relatively easy from the outside, but I know that there's a lot of work that's gone on there. And finally, I do want to really thank the interpreters today. I know I speak way too fast, and I'm sure that there have been many challenges for them over the course of the last hour and a half. They've done a great job in keeping us all connected and sharing all kinds of great information. I want to just sort of wrap up by reflecting on the fact that there's a whole lot of us from a whole lot of places who've been here today. We had participants from Hamilton, Montana, and Hamilton, Ontario. We had participants from Jalisco in Mexico and from Giza in Egypt, and from the Ganawage Mohawk territory all the way to Delhi in India. So thank you so much, all of you, for joining us. We hope you'll come back and do this again with us next week. Same place, same time. We really look forward to sharing things with you a week from now, when our topic will look at the ways in which established companies and large companies can help emerging entrepreneurs and young entrepreneurs in these green, environmental, and social spaces. Joining us from Mexico will be Juan Del Cerro of Sociolab and Disruptivo. From the United States, we'll have Samira Khan from Microsoft. And from Canada, we'll have Dr. Trevin Stratton from Deloitte, each of whom will reflect on the ways in which their larger structures can engage with and work with youth and other emerging entrepreneurs in the environmental space. We hope you'll join us. It's the same registration structure as it was for this week. I hope you've enjoyed today, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Gracias. Hasta luego.